Hey everybody, it's Julian. Welcome to the first ever episode of How I Produced. This is a series that I'm going to be using to explain to you guys how I produce some of the music that I've worked on, be it Pathetic Fallacy, my band, my other band Dumpweed, or my solo project Poems of Sorts. This song is going to be about that project, as you've probably guessed because of the title. It's about the first song that I've put out on that project, the only song that I've put out so far. It's I Stopped Smoking So I Could Dream About You, Part 1. It sounds a little bit like this. This is definitely the most production-heavy song I've worked on, so it only made sense to start out with this song. Also, just so you know, I will be including all the multi-tracks in a link in the description down below in a Google Drive file probably. You'll be able to download the files. You'll be able to mix the song yourself. They'll be 100% raw, so you'll be able to do whatever you want with them. And you'll be able to send me the mixes because that would be really awesome, and I would love to hear what you guys do with them if you're into production or trying to get into production or anything like that. I'd also be happy to give you some tips if you're looking for that kind of thing. Without further ado, let's jump right into Pro Tools, as the cool kids say. So here in Pro Tools, yes, for those who are wondering, by the way, who have ever seen me do stuff on other social media, I am in Cubase now. However, I did work on this song in Pro Tools, so that's why we're in Pro Tools. Anyway, moving past that now, these are my drum tracks, everything that's in purple. And they were programmed in Superior Drummer 3. And I was able to bounce down all of the individual kit pieces to their own tracks so that I'm able to process them as a real drum kit, because that was very important to me because I wanted to be able to add my own processing without dealing with pre-processed samples. This is the kick-in track. We got our snare. We got our snare bottom. All of these tracks are going to their own sum. So, for example, all the toms down here are going to the tom sum. All the snares are going to the snare sum. And all the kick, which is just one track, is going to the kick sum. Subsequently, that's good. Those are all going to the drum sum, and then the drum sum is going to the instrumental. I will explain the instrumental later. Also, you'll probably notice that these plugins are grayed out, and they're not looking like the trim plugin is right here. That's because I use some plugins on this mix that I no longer have, which means that we cannot listen to the fully processed drums in solo the way that I would like to, which sucks. I'm crying inside. It's really, really sad. I know. I'm sure you're crying too. But whatever, it's fine because we could play the raw things. This is what you would hear if you were to download the multi-tracks that I have at the link in the description. Download them, send me your mixes anyway. The next thing you're going to see here is these red tracks, and these red tracks are bass. What I did with the bass is I split up the high end and low end. It's a pretty common technique. I have the high end going through the STL Tonality Will Putney plugin, and I have the low end going through the STL Tonality plugin as well. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because I want to be able to control the high end independently from the low end. Say I want to hear more growl or more distortion from the bass, I just turn up the high end. I don't have to turn up the whole bass. Say I want to hear more low end, I just turn up the low end. I don't have to do anything aside from that. So on the high end track, in order to separate the high end from the low end, I have a high pass filter at 388 hertz, and that's going into the amp sim. And then subsequently, I have the low pass filter at 212 hertz on the low end, so that I only get low end. On the high end track, I have a little bit of EQ. That's cutting out a really annoying frequency that was in the high end that I could not stand. So that was that. And on the low end, I have R bass, which is something that I'm using to reinforce the sub of the bass because I wanted the bass to be below the kick in this song. I really like the sound of that, long, consistent low end that just goes throughout the whole song whenever the guitars play usually. It just makes everything sound a little bit more full and consistent and nice, and I like it. So that's why that's like that. The bass high end, I'm going back and forth. I don't know why I'm doing that, but that's the way I'm doing it. I have L1, it's a limiter. It's essentially just turning up the high end of the bass, and my computer's going to freeze again, but I'll keep talking while I can. This isn't really doing any gain reduction. It's just going to turn the bass louder, and it's occasionally cutting off a little bit of peak that would otherwise stick out, but otherwise it's not really doing very much except making it louder. On the low end, we have another L1 limiter, except here it's doing a lot more work. It's going like this. Whoops, that's both together. So this is also in the theme of keeping that nice consistent low end that I want, because what it's doing is it's smashing it with the limiter and causing a whole bunch of gain reduction literally whenever the bass plays. So it's just duct taping. If you look at the waveform, if I were to bounce this down, you would see the waveform. It would just look like that. And yeah, like I said, nice consistent low end. That's what I'm looking for. And then all together, that produces a bass sound that sounds a little bit like this. And then I had a little bit of volume automation in the bridge just so that the low end would pop a little bit more when that breakdown hits. So that's going out to the bass sum, which is going out to the instrumental sum. Same thing as the drums. Once again, instrumental sum talk later. So on to guitars in the yellow. All these yellow tracks are guitars. They have very minimal processing on them because I use my Kemper. And if you have some good Kemper profiles, you know that you pretty much have to do no processing once they're in the mix if you pick the right profiles for your mix. Here I have Synmix PRS Archon, slightly modified. I have the gain turned down a little bit than was stock in the preset, and the profile rather. And in the other guitars, I'm using the Synmix Razor BH18 profile. And soloed with all the processing, they sound like this. So if you look at the EQ, I'm only going to show one because all these EQs here are the same because it's the same guitar pretty much. We have a cut at 200 hertz, probably just for a little bit of mud. We cut out some of the low end to get rid of the conflicting frequencies with the bass. We also cut out a little bit of a 2K whistle that was annoying the crap out of me. I don't think I did anything for the only difference between these two and these two, because they're different profiles, is I didn't cut out that 200. That's the only difference. And I put a little bit of a low pass because there was some annoying high frequencies that I didn't need, and they were probably masking the cymbals a little bit. Anyway, we also have this guitar BD, which is just guitar breakdown, which is for the build-up of the breakdown, and it's just one going right down the center because I wanted it to really pop extra when the breakdown came in, and it sounds like this. So that's it. Really simple stuff. Double tracked guitars. Nothing very innovative. These are two separate performances, by the way. Do not let anybody tell you that you can duplicate one guitar take and then pan one left and pan one right, and then you could slip one a couple milliseconds at a time, and it's going to sound like you double tracked. It doesn't sound like you double tracked. It sounds like garbage. Don't do that. So yeah, we have the guitars, the rhythms going to the rhythm sum, and then this breakdown going to the guitar sum, and then the guitar sum is going to the instrumental sum, which once again we will get to eventually. Now we're on to the keys, which I think is the most interesting part of this song. I'm just going to play it part by part because there's a lot of stuff and it would take me forever to play each individual element soloed. All of the sounds are from Omnisphere, which is an amazing synthesizer plugin from Spectrasonics. I definitely recommend it if you have the money. It is a little bit pricey, but it is definitely worth it because it covers pretty much everything you could possibly need for synthesis in the software world, and also my computer's freezing again. So I'm just going to play all the keys that I have going on in the chorus, and they sound like this. So the amazing thing about Omnisphere is that you really don't have to do any crazy processing. Anytime you see an EQ on these keys, it's probably just a high pass filter to get rid of low end, because I don't want it to to clash with the kick or the bass. So that's pretty much all this processing is. I have L1 probably just to make it louder and to cut off peaks, like I pretty much always use L1 for. So that's the chorus. If you want to listen to the second verse, it sounds a little bit like this. Definitely can't hear the synth bass if you're not listening on headphones or good speakers, so I definitely recommend doing that if you're not doing that already. The pre-chorus, we have a little bit of stuff going on, nothing crazy. Here's what that sounds like. So super distorted, just cool swell pad, just trying to build up to that chorus, and then the chorus hits and then it plays the stuff that I already played you. We also have the breakdown. My favorite sound in this whole song is probably this thing. I love that. I don't know why. It's just an Omnisphere patch. It's like super basic, but it's cool. I did some modifications to some of these patches. They're not just stock Omnisphere presets. So I have this Pan Man, which is pretty much just randomly panning this stutter thing around. You can't hear that unless you're listening on headphones or stereo speakers. So once again, I encourage you to do that. I also have this pad build up that I didn't show you. It's just a drone to add a little bit of atmosphere. There wasn't really too much else that was interesting that's going on. I also have this swell in the pad, this swell pad in the pre-chorus that I did some stuff on. This has the tremolator plugin by Soundtoys, which is essentially what's causing that sound. So that's what that is. That's another one that I did add some stuff to. That's not just me clicking a preset in Omnisphere and being like, okay, sounds good. That's enough of that. All these grayed out parts, by the way, are the MIDI for the part above it. So for example, this is the MIDI for this. And this is the MIDI for this. In other words, that's the MIDI that I use to create those sounds. And all of these keys are going out to the key sum, and then that's going out to the instrumental. Next up, we have effects. Now, the effects are in orange. This is the intro. All this is I bounced down the entire mix, and then decided to use this Devil Lock, which is a really aggressive distorting compressor from Soundtoys. And I automated this darkness knob. The higher the darkness, the less high frequencies. And I essentially just rolled it back progressively. As you can see with this line, that's what that is. And yeah, it made it go from no high end to the full frequency spectrum. So that's what this sounds like. And then I also used Decapitator, which is another plugin from Soundtoys, to just distort the living crap out of it. So that's pretty much that. Had a little bit of automation there, and that's the intro. Next up, we have a riser that I made with a plugin called The Riser. It's by AIR. It's a good time. Listen to this. Pretty much just like your stereotypical EDM. Oh my God, the drop is coming. Holy crap, it's coming. And then everybody loses their minds. And then we have this super quiet swell. Yeah. Just to, help transition that a little bit better. That's also the riser. I made that in that plugin. We also have this little swell right here. Let's just solo these together. So essentially we have a couple things going on here. We have this little swell thing, which is the thing that you hear right before the breakdown kicks in the song. And then we have this drum swell, which I made by combining a bunch of different sounds. So we have these here. And I essentially just blended all these together. So here we have a snare, reverse. These are some of these samples I think I made. I didn't make any of these. I got these from a pack from Plugin Fox. Shout out to Plugin Fox. They're awesome. But I pretty much just took a bunch of their samples and combined them so that I could have like a swell, except it would be the full frequency spectrum. Like I didn't want just a snare swell because it would just be like the mid-range, and I didn't want a cymbal swell because it would just be high end. And I didn't just want a kick because then it would just be low end. So I blended them all together, and all together I made this. I just bounced it down to one track. And then this plugin here is just taking out a little bit of the low end because the reverse kick was out of control and I wanted it to calm down. Next up, we have this snare swell, which sounds like this on its own. That's sort of me, sort of just from that sample pack again. It's just this reverse, and I think I just reversed the reverse and made it sound like it was hitting. And then it was just like, in two directions, so it would sound bigger on top of the snare that's already there. So the intention was there for it to be sort of like a snare bomb. This one with all the crazy automation here is this mechanical sound that's kind of at the forefront of the choruses. It sounds like this. Yeah, so that's also probably one of my favorite sounds in this song. I love it. If you look at these points, it's pretty much just automating Little Altar Boy by Soundtoys to change the pitch. That's why it sounds like it's what. So let's check that out. So you can see the knobs moving around as that's playing. And that's essentially just changing the pitch and the formant in tandem with one another. And then we have it again over here. I believe I made that sound by taking a sample from Omnisphere that just sounded like somebody put a microphone down in like a factory that had a bunch of heavy machinery, and I just like chopped up different pieces of that thought I sounded cool, and then I put it in time with the song, and that's how that happened. And then I started playing around with Little Altar Boy, and I made that little effect there. We also have this last thing in the effects. We have this tape stop sound, which I kind of regret not putting louder in the mix because it's really cool. I used isotope vinyl on that, the spin down function that has, and that's going into the breakdown again. So I just essentially just have a crap ton of effects going right into that breakdown. So that's that. And then all the effects are going to the effects sum, and then the effects sum is going to the instrumental. Now we can finally get to the instrumental thing. It's sort of just a safety thing. If I ever want to bounce out just an instrumental version of a song for some reason, if I ever want to hear, solo just the instrumental so that I don't hear any of the vocals, because I usually like to mix my instrumental and my vocals separately. Just because I like to focus on one thing at a time. So vocals now. These are all main vocals. I just split them up on different tracks because apparently there were some overlaps and I didn't want them overlapping. So I'll play a part of the chorus.
But what you don't know is that my heart broke when she left us. Now I'm fucked up.
So I do a good bit of processing on these vocals. I just took out a little bit of 500. I don't know why. I have this channel strip here that is taking out some of the low end rumble that's there for no reason, brightening up the vocals a lot, just adding a lot of high end. A nice thing that I like to do on my vocals is a trick that I learned from Jordan Valeriat in one of his videos, and that is that he takes this compressor from a channel strip or just any compressor and just smashes the living crap out of the vocal. So it's just constantly getting compressed, kind of like the low end of the bass. And then he has a second compressor here in the CLA 76. This is the exact one he uses actually. And then that just adds like a tiny bit more attitude and makes it sound like he's going, I'm going a lot harder than I actually am. And then I have this distortion. As you could probably hear, I kind of distorting the crap out of these vocals so that they cut through the mix, and also so that they're nice and consistent. Notice the theme of consistency here. When you have a lot of production elements going around like this, it's really hard to make things sound good without having a lot of consistency. It's almost like dynamics are bad sometimes, which a lot of people wouldn't be a fan of me saying, but I'm saying it anyway. I also did a Vox dub, which is just essentially me singing the same thing underneath the first one to make it sound a little bit thicker. It's literally the same exact thing, pan right down the center. Sometimes I would do it again and do left and right. Once again, these are 3 separate performances. So all in all, I have 4 performances on this part right here, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are pan left and right. So if you solo these together with the mains and the chorus, it sounds like this.
But what you don't know is that my heart broke when she left us.
Listen on headphones or else you can't tell that just got wider. And then we have Vox Whisper, which is really quiet in the second pre-chorus. Over compressed whisper sounds for all that kind of stuff. So now the Vox sum goes out to the P-mix, and the instrumental goes to the P-mix as well. So the P-mix is where everything gets together. Also we have our what's it called? We have our effects. That's what those are called. So Chris Crummett does this thing where he has a preset called Snare Trap in TrueVerb. It's a reverb plugin by Waves, and it's essentially just a really short reverb from the snare that's making things wider, and it's the first step in kind of adding that bigger snare sound. And also we have the drum verb, which is also taken from being used on the snare, and it's essentially just a longer version of the snare. So if I bring that in line, it sounds a little bit like this. So here I have a nice trick. The SPL transient designer, or any transient designer, will do this well. Put it before your reverb so that the snare is going into the reverb harder than it's actually being hit, so that the reverb sounds really pops. This only really works sometimes. Obviously, it's a little bit too intense for the other times, but I like to use it in this instance. We also have a Hall Vintage verb for the main reverb sound, and then we're not cutting out anything actually. I don't even know why I have that EQ there. These guitar verbs and delays are not being used. We also have a Vox delay. We have a Vox verb short and a Vox verb long, similar to the snare drum and the toms. I like to blend a short reverb with a long reverb. And I also have a lot of volume automation going on in these vocals too. I forgot to mention that. It's just line by line. If I ever felt like a line was getting buried, I turned it up a little bit. This is just a fade out for this. Wait for the rest of us.
Wait for the rest of us!
And I also have a thing going down. It kind of sounds like I'm flying down a thing, because what I'm also doing is I'm automating the level of the send to the reverb. So as the volume of the main vocal is turning down, the reverb's turning up. So it kind of sounds like I'm falling down a canyon or something. It's a nice little touch. That's another pretty common production tip. On the master bus, on the premix, I'm just adding a little bit of high end so that it brightens up the overall mix a little bit. I have this Plugin Alliance Townhouse compressor. It's just an SSL style compressor for the master bus. Long attack, short release. Also have the C6, which is essentially controlling the low end. It's taking the low end, turning it up, but it's also turning it down. Like, it's just compressing it and making the dynamic range of the low end smaller. Once again, more consistent. Another common theme. Ozone Imager is the last thing in here, and what that's doing is it's making the mix just a tiny bit wider. This inactive thing is a limiter, and that was on the final mix. It's not on this because I don't have it anymore, as I told you at the beginning of this video. So yeah, that's about it. I stopped smoking so I could dream about you. And yeah, it's a really fun song. It's got quite a good amount of tracks. If you like everything here, be sure to let me know down below. Throw me a like. Give me a sign that you're enjoying the content. I'm going to, like I said, include all of these multi-tracks 100% raw at the bottom of this video in the description. So if you want to mix this song on your own and send me your own mixes so that I could hear them, do it, please. I'd really love to hear what you guys can pull off with this stuff. And yeah, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day / night, and I will see you around. Adios.